What's going on, guys? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to give you a few tips about working with epoxy. So if you guys have been following me very long, you know I use epoxy quite a bit, and I wanted to go over a few things with you on how to avoid some of the common mistakes. So a common question I get a lot is, what brand should I use? Well, as you can see, I prefer Moss epoxies. I've developed a good relationship with those guys. They treat me really well, and I really love all their products. I haven't had a problem really with any of them. As long as you follow the directions and everything else, just like any other epoxy, you should be fine. I have used other brands, and not to say they're bad. I've enjoyed them as well, but this is just kind of what I've come down to using mostly. So if you guys are in the market for any epoxy, Moss has agreed to give my viewers 20% off plus free shipping. So I'll give you a link in the video description below for that. Just use the code WALKER20 on checkout, anything on their site. It's a great deal. So I would say the number one use for epoxy in woodworking would be to fill knots and voids, cracks, stuff like that. There are specific types of epoxy for that. Like this here, the low viscosity is what I usually use because it runs into the cracks really well. It'll cure in a couple hours depending on the temperature and stuff, but you don't want to pour it too thick. So you see these guys doing really big pours with gallons and gallons of epoxy. That's what the deep pour is for. But for this stuff, you don't want to pour more than about an 1/8 inch at a time, or it'll get too hot and do what they call bake. Basically, the chemical reaction will make it too hot and it'll boil and bubble and crack and all kinds of stuff. So you don't want that. And then I would say the second common use would be for a finish, and that would be your tabletop epoxy. So these bars you see with a thick, real glossy finish, that's what they're using on that. This stuff's really easy to apply. Just mix it up, follow directions, pour it on top, even it out, let it run off the edges. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's not too hard to use at all. I've used it several times in the past, and it's good stuff. But the reason most of you guys are probably watching this video is because you want to do those big, nice, deep pours that everybody does with the huge slabs, you know, river tables, stuff like that. So for something like that, you're going to need something like this deep pour here, which is a much slower setting epoxy, like 24-hour epoxy, 48-hour epoxy. But it really depends on your climate, or in the shop, I should say. So basically, I don't even do pours really in the summertime because my shop is too hot. I'm literally sweating right now because it's 90 degrees in here. But I just don't do it because it causes too many problems. You want it to be about 68 to 74 degrees, roughly, somewhere in that area. I know people that pour in their house, etc., but you still can't exceed a certain amount. I would definitely reach out to the manufacturer of whichever brand you decide to use and see what the max pour depth is at what temperature. So I've poured this stuff about 1.75 inches. You can go up to 2 inch depending on what the mass is overall at one time without having too many problems. You want to put some fans on it as well to make sure that it doesn't get too hot, disperse some of the heat, stuff like that. So if you do have a deep pour that you're trying to do and it's over 2 inches or so, depending on mass, like I was saying, you might have to do more pours. So say you have a 2-inch pour that's 10 inches wide, 4 feet long or something, I'd probably recommend using the deep pour in 2 stages. So you can do 1 pour and you can wait till it's either just a little bit tacky and pour another layer, or you can wait till it's fully cured, scuff up the top a little bit, clean it, and then pour another layer, and they'll blend right together and you won't really see the layer unless you're using pigment. Then sometimes on the very end you'll see it, but it's usually not a big deal. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing a deep pour or any kind of pour or fill, you want to seal all the edges that the epoxy is going to come in contact with some penetrating epoxy. It will seal the edges so no air escapes as this is curing and creates bubbles in it. This is also good for wood that is kind of soft, kind of starting to rot a little bit. You can put this on there and it'll harden up. A lot of people use this for turning. They'll put this in their blanks and it will really make it a lot more dense and stable while they're turning. If you guys are interested in learning how to fill knots and cracks and stuff with epoxy, I made a video on strictly that already. I'll link that in the video description below for you guys. And I also have a video using the deep pour on some shelving that I did, and the penetrating epoxy in tandem with it. So I will link that in the video description below as well. Another thing about epoxy is each one usually is different ratios. So the normal epoxy is typically a 2-to-1, the deep pour is a 3-to-1, the tabletop is actually a 1-to-1, and I believe the penetrating is a 2-to-1 as well. So just make sure you read all your directions, follow everything to the T, and it should really limit your problems. A lot of people use it for art as well. I did a couple little things. I got some coaster molds and used the deep pour to just kind of encase some stuff. I got some bullet casings there and a fishing lure, which is pretty cool. And some other stuff that I've done is like my logo here. I filled it with the low viscosity, did a couple different pours because it was a little bit thicker and I didn't want it to get too hot. So that was pretty cool. And then the next thing would be the pigments. So you can pretty much mix any color you want. That's where you see all these crazy bright colors come from. They got powder pigments and they have paste pigments, which is basically powder mixed up a little bit already. These actually blend in a lot better, mix in a lot better, I should say, than the powder in my experience. I've used them in this, in the deep pour. I've even seen people use tabletop epoxy for fills and stuff like that, but I've never done that personally, so I don't want to recommend that to you guys. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give you guys a few tips about epoxy I've learned along the way and hopefully avoid some mistakes that I've made. If you guys have any more questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Please like this video if you found any value in it. Comment, like I said, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell to know when I drop new videos, and I'll see you guys on the next one.